Welcome to The Pivot, where we explore the shifts that open new possibilities for how we see, act, and navigate the world. Right now, so much is changing, faster than we can make sense of. It's easy to feel unmoored, caught between an unraveling past and a future that's still, taking shape. But there are those who can already see what's emerging, beyond the noise, beyond the confusion. In each episode, I sit down with visionaries, thinkers, practitioners, and pioneers who are not just imagining the future, but actually living it. They're sensing what's next and mapping the way forward. So if you're wondering how to navigate this shifting landscape, how to stay grounded, adapt, and even thrive, you're in the right place. This is not about quick fixes or the 7 steps to be more effective. This is about asking the right questions of yourself, of each other, of life, learning how to make sense of this changing terrain and how to move in it. You don't have to figure it out alone. I've got you covered. This is The Pivot. Welcome. This is part 2 of my conversation with Rob McNamara. In the first episode, we explored the unraveling, what falls away. This one turns towards reorientation. We explore practices, discernments, and how to lead from a place of presence and embodied wisdom. Rob brings a rare combination of rigor and depth, drawing from the decades of Zen training, adult development, and leadership work with individuals, teams, and institutions. He's a co-founder of Dragon Lake Zen, where he works to meet existential risk with spiritual intelligence and resilience. If you haven't heard episode 1, I recommend it, although you can dive right into this as well. Let's dive in. There's so much noise out there. There's so much writing going on that's more of a survivalist kind of bent, like how to just survive the meltdown. And you and I are both talking about something far beyond that. So how does the poly crisis move through us? And you mentioned that in the last call. I remember that. I like this question. What does it look like to metabolize these forces personally and relationally instead of being overtaken by them? And, and we touched on it last time, but I'm seeing even an increase since we last spoke of the anxiety in everyone. It's like a hum, almost like tinnitus, it's always ringing. And I've noticed in some of the groups I've been in, like last week, I was leading a group of leaders, and there were kind of eruptions in the group dynamic that had nothing to do with the content. Like they were so either out of proportion in their volatility and reactions, or the content just had no relevance to the emotional content that was showing up. And I felt like we were sitting on a volcano, like there's heat and lava moving through us. So, as I know, group dynamics, we're tapping into all kinds of energetic streams. So I think there's almost a sense of urgency that I'm noticing in how to help people get beyond just that survival or just like a maintenance level of operating, and to really work with this.
The limbic overwhelm is a deep structure that's being pursued, and so that anxiety and overwhelm and kind of we start getting disorganized, and our attention to and intention becomes kind of scattered and shaped by forces that aren't really our own. And that's kind of a death spiral.
Exactly. Yeah.
It
feeds on itself, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, that's a super rich area. And then that kind of bridges into what do we do? Practices.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you're just trying to survive, they already got you.
Yeah.
And I'd say they, as in kind of the kind of broader irregular warfare. And then there's just you lost yourself, like
Yes.
reality undid you, and the kind of basal dimensions of your consciousness, your intentionality, your ability to kind of attend to things that are valuable and meaningful to you, have been taken, or you've lost them, depending on how you want to look at it.
I think this is what I appreciate how I think, and thank you for bringing in kind of the origin of um, your perspective, the intimacy with death, how you're talking about it, how you've worked with it. I've known you for a while. This has been a, a, a pivotal moment to use that word too many
Yeah.
times, but most of us have a tendency to push that aside, to keep it in the shadows. It becomes an undiscussable, even in
Yeah.
some cultures. But I'm wondering if this is what's giving, like, this is an access point. Like, coming from that perspective, you've had to become very intimate in your pursuit of understanding death and your relationship with death. So it's no wonder that what's on the card table is, the pretty grim stuff that we're talking about because you look at it without blinking. And what I'm hearing is, and this feels important in ways I'm not sure yet, but the fact that it's not an either or. We don't spend time just looking at what's possible and the human spirit and the indomitable spirit through the ages. We also look at, in the same holding, that this may be the last gasp. Um, and I get excited when I listen to you, which is surprising to me because you would think you would just like, wait a minute, we may not make it. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really looking at this unblinkingly that seems to be a key, almost like a foundational
Yeah.
move. What
Well,
do you think?
this is
Yeah.
so if we get really intimate with loss, which is kind of a proxy for
Mm.
for death, you know, and we
Hmm.
make peace with that, and by make peace, there's a, on the one hand, there's a cultivation of equanimity or some stability of presence that can kind of find our way through just radical panic and devastation and despair and grief, and through those start to taste the dimension of ourselves that's unchanging, and that kind of affords us the capacity to actually go more deeply into those losses. To genuinely befriend panic is like, that's some high yoga. Like that's like some serious practice, or like real despair, um, um, ultimate forms of devastation, and and to kind of go more intimately into those experiences is like, kind of what is required for us to be able to flourish. And but there's this interesting kind of um, gate or portal that when you pass through it, there's these hidden veils of, like, this is where loss flips into redemption, where our deepest grief kind of taps us into our greatest joys, where the despair touches our love really intimately. And and this is kind of uh, an opening up of this other dimension of humanity, which is delighted. Like, like we're delighted. This, I often kind of feel this narrative, of like, of course we came in, brother. in this time to face this kind of thing. Like, we love this. Like, where everything's against the wall and it's all looking like it's not going to go well. And then there's some courageous faith that's unreasonable. Like the overt reason thing is like, you should just give up now. But this kind of, no, but there's an unreasonable that kind of transcends reason. It makes perfect sense. And it's like, this is the place that I find myself visiting. And when we kind of like, oh my God, this is crushing. And it's like, yeah, like it's totally crushing. And we get more intimately rooted into our love for being alive. And this is where death and life become not two. They're distinct but inseparable,
There's a nuance there that I can taste, and I want to bring it up because I think it's an important one. This going into death, it's almost like the old, what is it, the Winston Churchill quote, if you're going through hell, you keep going. You don't
Right.
resist, right? So you go through. But I've had some clients, and I've had it myself in life, where it's like there's a gusto, like, okay, let's go, like let's man up and let's drive into the fire. Let's walk on the coals. And that's not what we're talking about. This isn't an endurance or a conquest. This
Correct.
is surrender. This is that letting go over and over and over again. And I think this is because it doesn't make sense. It's something beyond sense. We were talking last time about the imaginal. This is going from the rational to the imaginal. And I think, in my work, I'm bringing in the non-ordinary states more because it lends itself to that surrender. It's almost like the training how to
Yeah.
let go. So being open, having a different kind of relationship with death, thereby a different relationship with life. Um, and to just talk about this like we're doing now can only get us so far. I remember a Rolfing session where I kept learning new ways to let go inside of intense, what I was calling
Yeah.
pain, but intense sensation. And there kept being a new level to let go. Like every time I thought that muscle can't release anymore. And then there was this subtle letting go even again and again and again. And I think I could feel that coming in as you were talking. There's a releasing to
Mhm.
get to that delight, that
Yeah. Well,
flame.
the letting go is what enables the grip. And so that this would be one of the things. And
Mm-hmm.
I often, like when I'm working with people, it's like, just notice your hand has these kind of two kind of extremities. One is just, when your hand rests and there's just no effort inside of it, like it's open, like anything can kind of enter the palm of your hand and it's like you're available for it. And then that's like the depth of the letting go that you're talking about. It's like, and you can find another layer of kind of habitual holding that creates more ease. you know and that's like the that's the letting go side, which enables the fist, right? Which is, or I often call it like it's the death grip, where you have clarified what ultimately matters to you. Like you've clarified your love and your desire for being alive and in relationship and in this miracle that we call life, and you're gripping hold intensely with everything you've got. And it's that range that we have to cultivate.
I think even cultivating the availability. Like what does it mean to become available as well?
which comes back to, I'm watching the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I'm a hockey fan, and it's like if these guys, if they grip the stick, their hockey stick, too much, their shots slow down. They start fumbling the puck, like it. But if you don't hold on to it, the guy just is going to tap. The opponent is going to tap the stick, and you're going to drop it, and then you're without a stick, which is a huge disadvantage. And so there's this mixture of like loose openness and right grip, but that comes with like this exquisite sensitivity to just this moment of when do you kind of grip a little bit tighter, when do you hold on really tight, when do you actually just let go, is this kind of dance that we're in with reality, and what's effective is changing from moment to moment, to your point of like this deepening of letting go. And I'm kind of bringing up the other side, which is like in these times, if we're just letting go,
right,
you're going to find yourself in trouble.
Right.
And if you're just gripping hold in the conventional sense, you're completely screwed.
That's right.
And if you're going to egoically soldier this, to your point, you're going to get crushed.
Yeah.
And you that's not the faculties that are required. And so just coming back to this pivot towards the non-ordinary states of consciousness, or non-ordinary states of being, non-ordinary ways of functioning, are really the only options on the table given our current circumstances. And that's always been the case. It's like, if you want to live full, rich, creative, liberated love, you can't do it via the ordinary means of being human. Like, you just can't. Do you need a bunch of those ordinary things? Yes. But, we have to kind of tap into this frothy kind of potential in humanity that's like, this is where the greats function from, like this crazy capacity for love and care and wisdom and like deep, refined discernments. And, and this is where we start to kind of press into these things that are unreasonable. It makes no sense to do that. But, this is that moment where you've planned your speech, you've planned it all, and you actually put it down and leap into the unknown of what are you going to say next. And in that participatory dance with mystery, you become a transmissive vehicle for creative evolution, in a way that your structured, logical, reasoned out speech could never touch. And are you building off of that? Yeah. And do you yoke some of it in? Of course. Yeah. But like, and this is kind of going way back. This is like, I'm thinking of Swami Vivekananda. He's like an early intersection of the Eastern and Western psyche. And he came to Chicago. I believe it was Chicago in 1901. And he's speaking at the World Parliament of Religions. And it's kind of like the West's first encounter of like an Eastern yogi coming to the States, and he lit up. You can listen to him. There's audio recordings of him. But he like lit up the World Parliament of Religions because he was not talking about it, but he was embodying it. He was like speaking as the tongue of the divine, to the divine. And it was just nobody in the West at that point had like experienced that. And it was like,
Sure.
oh my God,
Yeah.
in a different way. Like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
that's
Literally.
amazing,
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, this is something that we've always done. And, it's fresh right now too.
It's nice to remember that. Like, that's
Yeah.
fortifying. What what would be a version of this dance with the mystery? So instead of trying to navigate it or survive it or unlock it, but really dance with it, what will that look like today? Like when you're working with someone, what's the capacity that you're starting to work with, helping them build to be able to do that fine tune of availability, open palm, and then skillful, conscious grip?
Yeah.
That's always tuning, you know?
Yeah. So this is the a triple of the known, the unknown, and then the unknowable.
Mm. 3
And
scoops.
you got these 3 scoops, and depending on what somebody's working on, what context they're in or what their intention is, there's always this inquiry of, well, what do you know? What are you really sure of? And then we need to be clear about how well grounded are those things that you're certain of. Because I always used to teach my students when I would put my professor hat on, it was like, you're fine until you're certain, and then you're probably in trouble.
Yes.
But there's also something about, watch a really skilled craftsman, woodworker with their tool. Like, they're absolutely certain of the way that blade cuts the wood, and so there's real certainties that matter when it comes to kind of mastery and skill, and so I don't want to, like, hey, just put all your certainties down. No, it's like, no. Let's really clarify and reify. Do you have necessary, sufficient, and complete certainty about certain dimensions of your craft and what you need to do? So that's kind of usually a place to start. And we're already, you can sense that if you're doing that well, you're starting to work with the unknown. Is it? I don't know. Let's test it. And so we're starting to kind of bring into the domain of, like, I've spent my life in this area, and there's still so much that you don't know. It's kind of like we think we've really figured something out in our youth, young adulthood. Like, yeah, no, I know this whole thing, and it's like, yeah, great, be careful.
Good beginning. Right.
Good beginning. And then you talk to a master, like, I almost know nothing at all, but this kind of joining the unknown with the known, and this kind of alchemical clarification process. And clarity has both the abstract sense of really understanding something, but then the embodied clarity to be able to move through something.
Yes.
And both of those are required, and then, as our skill meets world, like, we ought to be intimate with the unknown. This is where the training and sensitivity to nuance really starts to show up. So, once we've clarified, like, what is certain, then we can start to work on nuance and sensitivity, and, like, the capacity to like make the slightest move with your mind, with your heart, with your words, with your blade, with your code, and then to notice the feedback, like to really pay attention to the feedback, such that the sensitivity is becoming more nuanced. And this is coming out of, like, I'm making this choice and I don't know what is going to happen. And I'm both simultaneously confident and certain about my intent. And I'm also like intimately in a seat of curiosity that is not sure what's going to happen. And it's that kind of sensitivity that enables us to be really refined with the edges of the knife, if you will, metaphorically speaking, of like, oh, it's not that angle. We got to come at this grain of wood is a little bit different. I got to come at it this way. Oh, there it is. That now I got the right kind of slope that I need for this joint, as an example.
Yes.
So, and this is like the closer we bring the known and the unknown together, we're in this perpetual process of discovery, and then some mysterious alchemical process starts to happen. And this is your nod to the non-ordinary, right? Is that the unknowable dimensions of creation itself become evident through your activities. And this is kind of the deeper contours of what does it mean to be confident. But like, this is where we can face existential risk. We can face catastrophic loss, civilizational change, decay, decline. It's like when you first person, like your whole vehicle is participatory with the activity or motions of creation. And creation, we might be more skillful just by calling it creating, like this active thing that is happening. And when that's like takes all of us, we're just so much more flexible and capable. And to your point, the whole construct of being the one that's in the driver's seat, in control, dissolves into this mystery of like something else is experimenting through me, with me, and it's using all of my discernments. But I'm now, not just the painter. I've yoked myself to this kind of broader intelligence that transcends myself and kind of plunges me into continuity with all life. And that's the joy. Of course. Like, civilization is on its decline precisely because, well, it's terminal. Like, if we keep going down this road, we all end, and that's like, of course I want to create. Like, what's the pivot from that,
Right. I can, as I'm listening, I can really hear into, this is a beautiful, it's not an analogy, it's a way of explaining and slowing down and deconstructing. And, with your background in Zen Buddhism, and I kept getting images of working in a dojo and even a samurai code. Um, this discovery, first of all, it's so counterintuitive to our Western minds. We're wired for action. So this suspension of action, to be able to slow down, to be able to perceive this almost invisible occurrence between that mesh, that zone between the knowable and the unknowable, for the alchemy to kick in, is spot on. How, like, if you and I were going to take a small group and start building that capacity, because I think about leaders, or people up to something, people who are so hardwired and incentivized to be fast moving, on their feet, figure it out. So we're asking them to suspend all of that now to build a different kind of capacity that ultimately will have a greater return on investment than anything they could have imagined. What do you think? Like if you and I had to dream
Mm.
up something together, a gathering this weekend, inner
The
wilderness, here we go.
rewilding of the leader. Yeah.
What will we, that's right. The
Yeah.
rewilding, um, the untaming. Someone else I was talking to was using that word. Um, yeah. What are your
Well,
thoughts?
just as a sidebar, it's any person that wants to work in world and contribute value must do what you just described. Like
Mhm.
the whole metaphor of machine or mind as compute, one, it's profoundly wrong. Like,
Yes. Steve March calls it the turning
yeah,
humans into
yeah, and
technology.
so it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the fuck you are.
Yeah.
like, like,
Yeah.
and so to mechanize self in org is a dead end, and I think we're seeing that really fast in terms of
Yes.
Shopify CEO saying, okay, like, we're not hiring another human being unless you can prove to me that the machines can't do it. It's just and that's
Right.
like, that's coming,
It's a
not
flip.
just
Yeah.
slowly, but like anything that is mechanized is going to be supplanted by machines, barring some kind of major loss of chip production capacity and that kind of stuff. But so I like the question is so good, and the first thing that comes up is like, I don't know, because like, who are these collection of individuals, and where are they at in their learning journeys, and what are the dilemmas that they must kind of navigate today, or their organization isn't going to survive in the next quarter or 2 years, from a leadership perspective. And this notion of institutional viability that rests on like fundamentally what an organization is, just people keeping each other company with purpose. And it's kind of drifting in the Shopify example of like, well, it's machines
Yeah.
keeping machines busy, you know, for efficiency purposes, and that are incredibly fragile. Like efficiency just creates fragilities, and like those systems, they might be super profitable for a short period of time, and then wah, wah, change happens, and the fragilities can't adapt, and all of a sudden
Yes.
you're done, and that's the nature of kind of technology can't fix itself. Technology can't fix itself.
Well, and I mean, it was humorous when you said it, but it's also true. Is I think the prerequisite or the first move is I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. But I love the inquiry.
And I think what you talk about the knowing, the unknowing, and the unknowable. One kind of example of that is sense making. For the knowing. What is your sense making ecosystem? What is on your dashboard? How do you know it's true? How do you know it's not an echo chamber? Seems pretty fundamental as a
Yeah,
maybe not a first. This probably isn't linear, is what I'm starting to learn in this conversation. I'm also experiencing that in my work where it isn't linear, but that is a foundational movement because if we're acknowledging that what's worked in the past isn't going to work, the maps are gone. Um, there's not even a desire or not even a usefulness of making new maps. It's like it's a different kind of guidance system.
Yeah.
So then it's
Yeah.
the how do I know and how can I be wrong move that starts to loosen that grip in the beginning, the open palm and the availability.
Yeah.
That seems pretty critical.
Yeah. And, my attention goes to kind of military strategy,
Mm,
and John Boyd's work and the OODA loop and like,
sure.
to your point, if you don't orient well, you're screwed.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and how do we orient is from some observation, some deep curiosity and sense making. And if you're doing this by yourself as a leader, by the way,
Yeah.
you're really in trouble.
Yeah.
And if you're using machines to sense mate, you're really in trouble.
That's
And
worse
if
than
you're
being
not
alone.
using, yeah, totally. So like in an ideal sense, invoking and plunging people into, like, I'm thinking a leadership team of genuine curiosity, which is
Hmm.
the kind of embodied experience of not knowing.
Yes.
Like, can you actually, does your team have the capacity to kind of plunge into a rich sense of not knowing that is profoundly anxiety provoking, where you're going to see people kick up, and usually it's the most senior leader, start hammering down certainties,
Hmm.
and everybody calms down around that. But did the stake go into reality, or some pseudo reality, or some flat out fantasy that could never actually be? And like, where are you at on that spectrum? And it's like helping teams kind of orient to, like, what is the kind of central thing that we're going to circulate. And you're right, like, if you're working with lines and linearity, like, you're in deep shit.
Yeah.
Like, you need to be
Yes.
working in cycles, and you got to be like in kind of circular flows that keep going around this kind of core thing that really, that's your mission,
Yes.
and this is the strategy. How do you keep circulating around it as a means of excavating, uncovering things that are of greater value? And then how do you kind of put people into motion in really sincere, meaningful ways that create that differential value, that if you don't do it, like, your organization doesn't have a future.
I could really hear in what you're talking about. The open palm, the availability. So there has to be
Yeah.
the relaxed state to be able to be genuinely curious and overly curious and peeling the layers of the onion with curiosity and learning, and then being able to go to the conscious grip, for leading or for setting direction or for communicating. And it's almost like the bowl that holds this, or the container that holds this, is a certain stance, a perspective, um, that has me curious. There's elements I can taste and tease out, and that is a relaxed state that's so counterintuitive. And
Hmm.
we both know the wisdom of meditation or martial arts, all the different lineages that inform this. What else do you think is, first of all, do you see that as a container or like a bowl or a holding? And if you do, what else is kind of needed, if anything, in addition to that capacity
Well,
to be open and relaxed?
this is kind of, if you're in the case of a leadership team, or somebody who's trying to navigate world more effectively, um, there's an intimacy with kind of relating to world, and
Yes.
um, the world is literally made up of discontinuities. Like, the closer you look, the more distinctness that you keep finding, you know, and until you get into these kind of, well, there's essentially things are probability clouds. You know, like you can't even find the thing anymore. It's like, but the world is made up of discontinuities where this thing starts and that thing begins. And people don't genuinely appreciate the more intimate you are with the discontinuity of things, its impact on psyche. Like what happens to your consciousness the more intimate with worlds you are. And so that the other kind of core relationship is intimacy with oneself. And so like the intimacy with consciousness as a ground, like what you're made of, like the interior of your experience, like what is it? And we're starting to kind of plunge into the unknowable, but nonetheless, like if we don't do the depth of interior grounding or rooting into consciousness, you're not going to have the capacity to deal with asymmetric, fast pace, discontinuous change that is increasingly defining our world, especially as kind of exponential technologies ramp up. And so, like, if you're going to have the capacity to be integrous, to remain whole in the face of change, you have to do the self-work. And if you're a leader working in fast-paced places, you need deeper work on the interior. And this is kind of a principle that comes from a mentor of mine, Forrest Landry, that the faster the pace of change, the greater the depth required. And, you know, I've been thinking about this for a long time in terms of what do we do with people who are, you know, in nuclear security or working close to exponential technologies, or even just downstream from that, really, of like, here's a fast-paced market that's, you know, the competition is ferocious and there's a ton of different players in the space, and, you know, it's moving really fast, you know, and we have to be intimate with that world. You cannot not.
Say more about what it really means to be intimate.
Well, so Master Dogen, he defines enlightenment as intimacy with all things. And in the Zen tradition, there's this conversation of like, are you approaching the 10,000 things? Because if you are, you're deluded. And you're in trouble. Like what you do, just be very careful, because karma is real. This whole law of cause and effect, you're gonna approach those 10,000 things, and you're gonna do a bunch of stuff, and those 10,000 things are gonna kind of come back at you in ways that you can't conceive of, and it's usually gonna involve you feeling suffering. And so this notion of enlightenment, of like, instead of approaching the 10,000 things with this kind of distinct self that's kind of trying to assert influence or control or power in world, it's this, to your point, deep letting go, where the 10,000 things advances and constructs you. And I kind of am making a little bit of a delta from Dogen. And I say, well, enlightenment isn't intimacy with all things. That's enlightenment is intimacy as all things. And this is where, you know, that martial art metaphor is a great one. You know, where you're in battle, and every slight move matters. And the subtle kind of undulation in the left shoulder and the head imitates the first movements of a strike from that part of the body, you know? And the unpracticed one will start to then approach those things as if that's what's happening.
Mm.
You know, and your master is actually started that movement but then left it. And the attack is coming from the other foot. But your mind is colluded and collapsed into, oh, it's coming from over here, and 0.2 of a second later it's all over. You know? And this is the degree of, like,
Yes.
we're talking about, like, profound nuance and intimacy, as all things
Yes.
enables you to kind of feel and be at one-ment with the fake.
Yep.
And then,
Yep.
I totally felt your commitment into your leg that's planted, that's lifting the other one. I can feel the inside of what you're doing. I remember I was working with a professional quarterback, and he was describing when he was at his best, he would be dropping back in the pocket, and he could feel the defensive back plant his foot in a particular direction, and he would then throw to the other side, and his receiver, could feel that too, and would, and this is kind of intimacy as all things. Like, there's some, to your point around non-ordinary states are required. If you're just going to try to logically figure this thing out, you're screwed. Like, the level of being consciousness inside of all things is a deep rabbit hole that appears to be a foundational piece for how do we become more skillful. And this is nothing new. Like, the yogis and the Buddhists and the Christians and the Kabbalistic masters. I mean, we can go around the world and they're all like, yeah,
Sure.
like, there's this post-conventional or transpersonal or post-conventional, or however you want to think about it, domain of capability that can be cultivated that enables us to function in much more intimate, nuanced, sensitive ways where we can be of greater value and service to others. There's the influence, there's the strength and the power. But it's a gift of oneself to oneself,
Beautiful.
and that's just night and day from what typically people are doing.
That's right. This being of the 10,000 things as opposed to being separate. And we don't even have to get into woo-woo language around this. Like you said, these are solid tradition distinctions that are known. I was just thinking as you were saying it, when we were talking about the football player, I was thinking of a practice I've been doing both for myself and some clients of, going through the airport and dealing with travel and all the craziness. Most of us have a tendency to put a bubble around us. Like, can I just get through it? Pull the hoodie up over the head, put on the sound canceling headphones, head down, and just charge through the place. Um, and that has some degree of utility, but I found it was exhausting. And I started a different practice, and that was having the airport experience move through me. So people are moving through me. Everything is moving through me instead of bouncing off some sort of bulletproof bubble that I've created around myself. And I was astounded when I first started the practice that I wasn't exhausted. In fact, just the opposite. I was enlivened.
Yeah.
And the sensitivity and the choicefulness, like something would catch my eye off the corner of my vision, a couple clearly in despair over something that was going wrong, and it would just catch my eye, and then there would be like just an acknowledgement of it, and then a movement through, or something over here was happening and it caught my eye, but I wasn't being pulled into anything. It was all moving through me. And there was a choicefulness. And I noticed my senses all became very heightened as a result of it. So I've been giving this as a foundational practice to start just getting the distinction of being of something, which is pointing to what you're bringing in on intimacy. And
Mm.
I love the unlocks. I love the creative movement of how do we find practices, exercises, activities that can bring the distinction alive. Um, for those that aren't going to have the benefit of, decades of practice, and then building capacity through that.
Yeah. Well, and I always kind of come back to what do you think life is? Like, there's nobody that's not inside of decades of practice, and
Yeah, that's
there's
true.
more skillful and less skillful, but like
It's all
these are the
practice.
things, like when you really listen to somebody,
Yeah.
and the whole self-concept drops, and you just start very simply listening. You can feel them in
Yes.
ways that you know them and what's true for them, even the unstated things that um like it's all right there. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and as soon as you try to listen like that, then you're screwed.
Yep.
you know
I know that one
um
well.
yeah, totally we've been around that many times.
Yeah.
um
Well, listen, we're going to start wrapping things up soon, but I wanted to give a chance. Is there anything that's unsaid? Anything that's exciting you? Anything that's terrifying you? Where would you like to go that we haven't gone? As a way of wrapping up, I'm quickly realizing, Rob, we're never going to hit bottom. You and I, we're going to have to just keep doing this forever and ever and ever.
we're just gonna have to train people, in an ongoing way, which is kind of what needs to happen. Yeah. No, I mean, well, you're naming it in terms of like, oh, there's no end to us, which is an interesting thing to touch into, of like the space between us as something that, if not is an actual embodied infinity, it's something that closely approximates it. And this kind of the sense of social experimentation and free to like flow and ebb and kind of connect and explore, like, that lives between you and I, is a kind of a candle in the dark.
Mm.
But it's something that lives between all of us, that genuinely an infinite world of possibility lingers between you and the people that you love,
Mm.
and you and the people that you work with, and you and that next generation, or you and the generation that raised you. There's like what's between us is so miraculously, ineffably beautiful, and we got to tap into it.
Yes.
However, whatever you don't need to do it any particular way, but you've got to touch into what do you really love? What do you really, really value? And clarify that, and then explore. Because like this is where civilizational decay, it's clear you've run that thing, and it's no longer the central thing, and our social experimentation is what is going to enable us to find new ways to flourish together. And if there's something that we ought to be doing, it's like these covert private conversations that maybe people get to peer into or not, but like that's the kind of ineffable domain that I would just advocate. Like, you're tasting it a little bit between us,
Yes.
but like, go find it with maybe it's us, but maybe it's definitely with the people around you.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing this with your leadership team, like,
Yeah.
you should probably start very quickly.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now I know the topic for our next talk.
Okay.
Since we're never going to end.
Since we're never
and that
going to
is
end. Awesome.
that is the relational space. I mean, you and I have talked
Okay.
about it before, but I think there's an opportunity. This is new for some, not new for some, but there's a languaging around it. And I think making it accessible is critical. If we're talking about how to equip each other, it's moving away. It's killing that paradigm that this is a solo adventure. It's not a self-development mountain climb. We need each other.
Yeah.
And it's not just for companionship. It's to what you said. The space between us informs. It becomes charged. It's generative. So it's virtually untapped, I think, in our culture. And this is something I think we could explore and really help some folks see it.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed this dialogue with Rob. And as this conversation's coming to a close, what's staying with me is how grounded it felt, even though we spoke about uncertainty, complexity, and collapse. And I really appreciate Rob didn't offer frameworks, but what he offered was presence. You could hear it and feel it. He reminded me that leadership today isn't about having the answers. It's about building the capacity to stay in relationship with reality, with each other, and with what's unfolding in each of us. It's both personal and transpersonal. And across both parts of this conversation, this dialogue we have, I really felt the ability to stay, to not retreat, but to engage more skillfully is what was coming through. And to slow down and deepen our attention. And be available to what really matters, even when it's hard to name it. Stay there, let it unfold. Because what we practice now in our conversations, our choices, our relationships, that's what's shaping our future. And that, I think, is where leadership begins. And if this episode sparked any questions or provided clarity for you, I'd love to hear about it. You can find me at daveshof.com. The link is in the show notes. Or join the conversation in LinkedIn or Substack. And if you like the podcast, please subscribe. If you know anyone who might benefit from understanding the times we're in and the need for the pivot, please forward this to them. And as always, thank you for tuning in to The Pivot, where we meet at the edges, explore the in-between, and stay with what's unfolding. Until next time, keep listening, keep feeling, keep exploring, and keep finding your way. This is Dave Schoaf at The Pivot. Go well.